Hello, welcome back to C.A.R.E.ing Conversations. We're coming to you from C.A.R.E., the Center for Abuse and Rape Emergencies. My name is Shannon, and this is Kira, and we are sexual assault advocates here at C.A.R.E. Kira has done some research on sexual assault in the military, and that is what we're going to be talking to you guys about today. So, Kira, what are some of the things that you have learned about sexual assault in the military?
Thank you, Shannon. Actually, I have learned that the UCMJ, which is the Uniform Code of Military Justice, which defines sexual assault in the military as rape, sexual assault, forcible sodomy, aggravated sexual contact, abusive sexual contact, and any attempts to commit these offenses. They oversee all of the conduct that happens within the military. And it is pervasive. It does happen in all branches. There are two types of reports that survivors can make, restricted and unrestricted. Restricted means that they can receive services, psychological, medical, things like that, but it goes no further. There's no investigative process that begins. It's a confidentiality issue. The unrestricted is when they receive the same services, but they can also seek to have their perpetrator arrested and punished if that warrants in the case. It's determined after investigation. But that being said, a survivor that presents and only wants a restricted case can switch at any point in time to unrestricted. Or they can, if they change their mind and they decide they want to move forward with criminal prosecution.
So it's basically like whether they want to report or not.
Exactly.
What it is. Okay.
Yep, absolutely. And I will mention one other thing. When a report is made, change from restricted to unrestricted, the chain of command is notified, which is a lot of reason why a lot of survivors do not want to report or want the restricted because of retaliation that happens within the military,
Right.
which is one of the most common reasons why people don't want to be forthcoming about what happened.
Right. So what are some of the numbers associated with rape in the military?
We don't have the numbers for 2020 because they haven't been put out yet, but we have from 2019. And in 2019, there were 7,825 reports of service members as either victims or as subjects. So of those, there were 2,126 restricted reports, 5,699 unrestricted reports. And of these reports, 600 and 688 were with service members as victims. The rest are as perpetrators, I should say. The remaining were people outside the military that assaulted service members. So, and that's a 17% increase from 2018. Now, the military and the Department of Defense would like to believe that the 17% is not an increase in assaults, but that it's an increase in people becoming more confident in their judicial process and reporting more.
Right.
I'm not sure if that's the reason, but that is a pretty significant jump from one year to the next. So.
Right. Does it say like how many of those cases were actually prosecuted or?
Well, one of the things that happens is it's multi-year. So in other words, things that happened in 2019 that were prosecuted may have been from cases prior to that.
Right.
But I do have numbers I can give you if you like. 62% saw prosecution. The actual military, it's kind of a dichotomy. On the one hand, they prosecute at a very high rate because they will take cases that even a civilian court wouldn't take. Cases that might be too close to call, like just a he said, she said, and I don't mean that in a derogatory way, but without any other evidentiary things that they can introduce. But there is a 93% acquittal rate.
Oh, wow.
And one of the reasons may be that the jury is composed of 5 members. And women only make up 14.4% of the military. So the chances are you may only get one female on the jury, maybe more, maybe none.
Right.
And juries are loath to convict someone based on just if the only basis for the evidence in the trial is a he said, she said. Because those convictions warrant very high prison sentences. So they may feel that if it's too close to call, they will rule in the side because it is beyond a
reasonable doubt. Yeah.
Yes, so they're maybe reluctant just based on, like I said, just the he said, she said, he said component. So yeah, I mean, prosecutors will take those cases, and prosecutors are very highly skilled, and it just is the way it's set up that unfortunately sometimes evidence has either been collected, inadequately, or in the instance where sometimes when a survivor goes from a restricted to unrestricted, some time has passed. And if time has passed, then there can be, that's a defense lawyer's dream, where you can say, why did you wait to disclose? It just kind of casts doubt or tries to cast doubt on their story. Another reason why those cases are harder to try when people have taken time is because a lot of times survivors have a mistrust in the military. Even though they're within the military, they are afraid of what's happened getting out, which is why they take the restricted report route. That being said, they might go to a civilian hospital and to the police force outside of the military, and that comes into question where defense attorneys say, why did you not use a military facility? It just is another way for them to cast this doubt, which makes it harder for the 5-person jury, which is the number that's used when it's a non-death penalty case in the military, to convict on that basis. So.
Right.
But I do have other numbers too. 59% of people that were assaulted in the military were assaulted by someone of a higher rank.
Oh, wow.
24% were assaulted by someone in their own chain of command. 64% faced retaliation for reporting. That seems to be a big issue because what happens is a lot of times if somebody reports, say, harassment, there has been that retaliation where the people find out that they've spoken out, they come back and they say, well, you reported us for harassment, now see what's going to happen. It is done as a punishment for either being, quote unquote, a rat, going outside the unit. The unit it's like this cohesive group that even if the person has been assaulted or harassed, they don't want you going outside. There is a very high rate of retaliation. And the numbers for men, they underreport, and they're really hard to actually to analyze. The reason being is that a lot of times men are harassed or even assaulted as hazing or initiation, both of which are illegal. But they are faced with, if they report, they are considered weak, they are considered, maybe they're labeled gay, nothing wrong with that, but they have a stigma attached to that. Why didn't you defend yourself? Why did you allow this to happen? So men are very reluctant to report any kind of assault.
Right.
So those numbers, we don't even have those numbers actually. 18% of survivors of military sexual assault are more likely to commit or try to commit suicide because of that stigma. One of the things is, a lot of times, if someone's arrested in the civilian world for an assault, they might go to jail, they might not be able to bond out. That doesn't happen in the military. They might be moved out of your unit if there's an allegation made, but inevitably you will run into that person, especially if you're on a base with them.
Wow.
So the military is also very reluctant to issue any kind of, protective order because they believe in the presumption of innocence, and they believe it destabilizes the unit as a whole. So even though on the judicial side may be more thorough in the backing of survivors, the way that it operates in the chain of command, there are a lot of gaps that they have in their process, and unfortunately in this day and age you wouldn't think that would happen, but it does.
Right.
They feel that it brings stigma. Even if survivor reporting, it's not the person, the assailant, that brings stigma. It's just outing what goes on. It's like they kind of have this code of silence, if you will. And unfortunately, when people try to go against that code for their own sake or for the sake of somebody else, and it casts a negative light, then there is a great chance of some kind of form of retaliation. And there's been victims that have reported, and they have been demoted in rank. Being considered insubordinate. There's also, you cannot fraternize, which is you cannot go out with someone or date or marry someone from a different rank, from a higher rank to a lower rank, cannot engage. And if you report on someone who's in your chain of command who's at a higher rank, you are the one who pays the price. It's not the person that is, you would think, the person in charge. It always falls on the survivor to take the brunt. And it's very hard to go against that tide to come forward.
Right.
Because, facing the backlash that they face, and they might feel very isolated. That's another thing. A lot of times when the survivor is assaulted, chances are they have a support system in place, maybe family, friends. But these individuals are deployed all over the world. So they might be on a base where they are thousands of miles from anybody outside of the military that they can even talk to. Now, we do have, computers and you can FaceTime on your phone, but there's nothing there that doesn't compare to actually being in the presence of somebody who believes you and trusts you and validates what you say happened. So it takes a lot of courage for them to come forward based on what they're facing, even in this day and age.
And that is a scary thought. You think of the military as people who are held to a higher standard, and that who obviously defend us and defend our country, but behind closed doors they can be doing things like this. Is very troubling.
Yeah, it really is. And that's another thing. The amount of harassment and assault that takes place within the United States is one thing. But on bases all over the world where they are isolated in a lot of circumstances. I mean, even in, there was tons of assaults reported in Afghanistan. And you figure in Afghanistan, they are completely isolated, and it is up to the military to get them home. And if they're not allowed to leave and come back, even if it's for their own safety, sometimes that happens. They are forced to be in the company of the person that assaulted them for an indefinite amount of time. And it must be awfully isolating and scary to be in that situation. I can't imagine being there, so far away, and feeling that you're so alone. Even though, ironically, you're probably not. I'm sure there's other people that have been assaulted, but sometimes they don't want to be the one to voice it because they don't want that backlash, which is just horrendous and prolific, especially the amount of suicides and the people that are really trying to change laws. And I was also just reading about the LGBTQIA+, where that in and of itself, I mean, up until 2011, it was don't ask, don't tell. So now that there is an open policy for people joining the military, they still are a greater number of suicides, greater number of harassment, greater number of assaults, especially when it comes to females that identify as lesbian or bisexual, because men have been known and have admitted this in people that have been convicted where they've done interviews, find it as a challenge to test their sexuality. Like, oh, you're lesbian, well, you've never been with me, kind of thing. So it becomes almost a badge of honor, if you will, for some of these.
It's like a game.
Yes. Yeah, and it diminishes their self-esteem.
It does.
And one of the things is people always see the survivor as compromising the unit and that cohesion. And there's nothing more important, especially in a combat situation. You have to have that cohesion. You rely on each other for your very life. I mean, you can't function if you're not trusting of each other. But it's not the person that's the survivor that has compromised that integrity. It's the perpetrator.
Abuser,
Right, and absolutely. And for some reason, we still, the stigma is still on the individual who has been assaulted, rather than the person who's committed the crime.
Yeah, it's such a shame.
It's terrible. The biggest issue that seems to be right now is that there's been a rallying cry for the military to stop policing themselves, that there should be an outside entity that examines evidence, conducts interviews, seeks justice where warranted, because it is that network of that wall of silence. And it's a shame because the military is filled with wonderful men and women. This is just a small part of it. It's too large a number, but as a whole, they are really dedicated individuals who put their lives on the line every day once they sign that paper to enlist. And this shouldn't be the stigma that is in their face or in the public's face and questioning what goes on. I mean, honestly, if it weren't for them, we wouldn't have our freedom, but there needs to be better accountability, better standards, better protection for survivors, more help, and more transparency rather than the secrecy and things like that. And I just want to say that because I don't want it not to be disparaging, but they're too good of an institution to let this be a black mark. They need to, move forward with. And I mean, one other thing that COVID did, and I'll just end with this, is that there was an investigation going on. And it was going to take place in April of 2020, and it was going to be a study based on interviewing the people that are in the Naval Academy in West Point. And COVID shut that down, and it hasn't been rescheduled until 2022. So it's just another. I mean, there's been a backlog of cases. That's another thing. Trials haven't gone to trial because of COVID. Interviewing witnesses has been delayed. So it's just another hurdle to overcome. But it can be done. And there are a lot of good men and women that are volunteering, former servicemen and women that are now in Congress, or just law enforcement officers, anybody, even outside, that can come together and just make sure that the right thing happens and that people are taken care of and protected.
Yeah, and everybody should be held accountable, no matter what your rank or anything like that. Well, thank you for sharing all of that with us.
Anytime, absolutely.
We would also like to say that we, as sexual assault advocates, offer 24-hour hotline services to anybody who has been sexually assaulted, whether that be in the military, not in the military. We offer counseling. We offer hospital advocacy. So if you ever need to go to the hospital, we have advocates that can go with you. Also, we would like to thank FCASV for making this possible, and check out our Instagram and Facebook. Our sexual assault helpline is 941-637-0404. And thank you for watching C.A.R.E.ing Conversations.